So, if you're trying to follow along in the Bible, we are in chapter 3 now of Esther. And it talks about now that King Xerxes, he promoted Hamon above all the other nobles and all the other king's officials. And he was almost like a vice president or prime minister. He had a lot of authority. And he was commanded, they were commanded to respect him. So they needed to bow down before him whenever they saw him. But there was someone that didn't bow down. And that was Mordecai. And Mordecai was also a Jew, because him and Esther were Jews. And when Hamon saw that Mordecai would not bow down or respect him, he was filled with rage, is what the Bible says on here. And he learned that Mordecai was a Jew. So he decided it was not enough to get a hold of Mordecai. He decided that he was going to kill all the Jews. Wow. What a very wicked, evil man. So it says here in verse 7, it was in the month of April, it was the 12th year of when the king had reigned, that the Bible said that they cast lots, which was in that time it was called Purim, and they cast lots to see what would be the best day in the month to take action. Wow. And so it was decided that would be March 7th, a year later. Now, does anyone know what it means to cast lots? This is kind of a different phrase to use. And does anyone know what that means, to cast lots? Okay. Yeah, it is kind of hard to understand. It means back then, and it was about 70 times this was cast lots is mentioned in the Old Testament. And it was, they either used dice, or they used stones, or they used sticks, and they would determine then how to make a decision by throwing the dice or throwing the sticks or rocks or whatever their rules were to decide on something, to make a decision on something. And so Hamon decided he's going to tell the king that this was his plan. And he told them that there's a race of people here that they're not following your laws, they're not doing your rules. It's not in the king's interest to let them live. And so he asked them, why don't you make a decree that we will go ahead and eliminate these people, we will kill these people, and I'll pay for it too. It said 10,000 large sacks of silver. And some places say that was about $30 million. So Hamon was very, very rich. And the king agreed. And he removed his ring and he gave it to Hamon. And he said, go ahead and make this decree and seal it with my ring. So on April 17th, the king's secretaries, it said, wrote this all out. And it was sealed with the king's ring. And there was dispatchers, that means that everybody on horseback, they wrote it all out on paper and put it on the wall, put it on doors, put it on trees, whatever, so everybody could read it, that this was an order that would happen within a year. So it went to every province. There was around 150 provinces there. This was a very big country, and a lot of people lived here. So when Mordecai learned about this, it said he tore his clothes, he put ashes on his head, and he wailed and he cried, and he was just so distraught. And so all the other Jews, when they saw all the decree, they wept too, and they fasted, and they cried and they wailed, and it said that people laid in burlap and ashes. They were so distraught. Boys and girls, wouldn't you be upset? If you would think that your home, your mother, your father, your children, your brothers and sisters, your grandparents, everyone would be killed. And this is what's going to happen. So Queen Esther's maids and her assistants all came out to Mordecai, and they asked him, what is going on? What is the matter? Why are you doing all this? And so Mordecai told them, and they went back to Queen Esther, and they told her. And so the queen even sent out some different clothes for him to wear. And he goes, no, I'm not going to change my clothes until something can happen. Something can be done. So she went back, and she did give the message back to him that said, well, I have not been called to the king for 30 days. He has not called for me. And anyone that's not called, does not come into the court, that's not been called, can be killed. I know that sounds weird and that sounds very harsh, but that's how they did it. So you couldn't just rush in there and talk to the king because you'd be killed. And if he raised his scepter, which was a golden scepter, then they were allowed to come in. And so, this is a very, very important verse right here. And Valerie, I know you're a great reader and you love to read. Would you read verses 13 and 17 of chapter 4? We're on chapter 4, 13 through 17. That is great. Yes. You see that, what he said? What she said? He said, if you keep quiet at a time like this, how are the Jews going to be delivered? Who knows if perhaps you were made queen for just such a time as this. And then Esther said she wanted them to all fast, not to eat for 3 days and 3 nights. And then she said, I will go to the king, and if I must die, I must die. Wow, what a brave, brave woman to be so concerned about her people that they were going to die. They truly were. So on the Bible says, it talks about on the 3rd day of the fast, because Esther had fasted, she put on her robe, her royal robes, and she entered the inner court of the palace and by the king's hall. And the king was sitting in his throne, and he saw her. And he lifted up his scepter so she should come in and talk to him. And so he asked her, what do you want, Queen? What do you want, Queen Esther? I will give you up to half of my kingdom. And she said, I would love for you to come to a banquet that I'm having for you and for Hamon. And I would love to have a banquet. And then I will tell you what my request would be. And so he said, yes, that'll be just fine. And Hamon heard about it, and he was a happy, happy man, the Bible says. But when he saw Mordecai sitting and not standing and not being nervous before him, it said Hamon became very, very angry again. He became furious. So he told all his friends, and he told his wife about all his wealth and he gets to go to the banquet and all the things that he was doing. But when he said, when I see that Mordecai, it means nothing. And so they said, hey, you know what? You just need to get rid of Mordecai. You need to kill him. Build this big old gallows for him, and you can kill him the next day. And so he said, yeah, that's a good idea. And so he had the gallows built for them. So that night, the king had a lot of trouble sleeping. And so he called for one of his attendants and said, I want you to read just the records for me of my kingdom and what's been going on. Well, they come to the point of the part where Mordecai had talked about the 2 men and had told them about the 2 men that was going to murder the king. And the king asked, did we ever do anything for him, for Mordecai? And they said, no, we have not, king. And so they did hear somebody in the outer court, and they said, well, who is that in the outer court early in the morning? Because he had not sleeping, and Hamon was there early in the morning. He was going to tell the king, you're going to kill Mordecai. You need to kill him. And so Hamon, he says, Hamon, come on into the court. Bring him in. And he said, what should I do to honor a man who truly pleases me? Well, Hamon thought it was for him. So Hamon told him, you know what? You need to put a royal robe on him, let him ride the king's horse, and let them go around the courtyard, the city square, on the king's horse. And the official will shout, this is what the king does for someone he wishes to honor. Excellent, the king said. So you can see Hamon, man, he's all getting all puffed up and everything. And man, this is for me. And you know what he said? He said, go do that to Mordecai. Go have Mordecai. Give him the robe and have him sit on King's horse, on my horse, and walk around the square and tell everyone, this is what the king does. He wishes to honor. So Mordecai returned to the gate, and Hamon hurried home. He was dejected, the Bible says. He was completely humiliated.